And if you're going to win souls, you've got to love souls. In spite of their meanness, in spite of the way they look, in spite of everything, you've got to seek to bring souls to Jesus Christ because you love them, because Jesus loved them, and because Jesus died for them, and you're trying to bring them to the Son of God.
Welcome to another portion of My Story Won't Wow You. Just little tidbits from my testimony and from my life, and I've heard several comments from a few different people that this series has kind of been a blessing to them, and so we're going to continue it with another part today. And so I hope we're not boring you, but hopefully hopefully you're getting something out of it. You know, the main thing I want you to get out of My Story Won't Wow You is it really doesn't matter what your testimony is. It can be something simple like mine. I grew up in a Christian home, you know, and I've never slept on the streets before. I've never been homeless. I've never done drugs, never taken a drink of liquor. I've never had a cigarette. You name a lot of stuff. I haven't done a lot of it. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home. I was quote-unquote sheltered from the world, and but I think that's a good term, and you've heard me use it before. If you go back to some of my parenting episodes, I think sheltering is a great thing, and it's not so much sheltering as much as it is protecting. And so I hope we're not boring you with this series, but I've heard a lot of good feedback, and so what I want you to realize is it doesn't matter your testimony. It could be something simple, something kind of sheltered like mine, or it could be something to where you have been through some of those things. You've been to jail, you've been to prison, you've come from some things we talked about in our abortion episode. Maybe you've had an abortion, maybe you've done some of these things. That doesn't remove what Jesus Christ has done for you and I. Do you realize it took the same sacrifice of Christ to save me from my sins as it took him to save you from yours? It's all the same. And the blood of Christ can make anybody a joint heir with our Savior, and that's something exciting. And so it really doesn't matter what your testimony is. What matters is how you use it. Do you use it to honor and to glorify God? And so that's what this series is all about. My Story Won't Wow You. It won't make your jaw drop. I have some great stories along the way, some things that I enjoy, some things I find funny. You may not find them funny, but I really enjoy just the life that I've been able to live by God's grace and his mercy and what he has done for me. And so welcome to Sandy Creek Stirrings. Of course, this podcast where our goal is to stir up Christians for the cause of Christ. And we just love doing that and being able to share with you content that hopefully does stir you up to be a better Christian, to live for Christ, and to, as our motto phrase is, to keep looking up and to keep stirred up for the cause of Christ. And so I hope we've been able to accomplish our goal, slowly approaching, well, I say slowly, it almost seems quickly. We're approaching 100 episodes, and so I'm excited about that. We've got over 4,000 listens on the podcast episodes up to this point, and so really excited. We've got listeners in 16 different countries, including whatever country you're listening in. And so hopefully you have been able to enjoy some of the content we produced here. As always, you can email me at joshua@sandycreekstirrings.com if you ever have an idea for an episode or something you would like to hear about, or maybe you have a question, a comment, or some feedback. You can always send that to joshua@sandycreekstirrings. By the way, there's a couple ways you can send an email. One, you can go to your email, simply send me an email, or if you just go to your text messaging, type in for the cell phone number, type in joshua@sandycreekstirrings. You can send me a sandycreekstirrings.com, that is. You can send me a text that will convert to an email on my email. So there you go, a couple different ways to do that. And or you can always just make it super simple. Go to sandycreekstirrings.com, click that contact button, and you can send in a question, comment, feedback, whatever you like. And we'll try and make sure we get a hold of that here on Sandy Creek Stirrings. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for being a listener. Obviously, we couldn't do what we do here without you being a listener. If we had 0 listens, I don't know that this would be very effective. And so thank you for listening and for paying attention and just being a part of our journey and our experience here at Sandy Creek Stirrings. So let's dive into today's portion of My Story Won't Wow You. Just some tidbits, some stories, some things that I've learned along the way through my life. And the Bible says that a wise man will really learn from any situation. He can look at any situation. He can look at a fool's vineyard. The Bible talks about in the book of Proverbs, and he can learn a lesson. The point being is a wise man can look at anything and he can learn a lesson from it. And something that I want to do is I want to be wise. I want to be able to look back at my life and learn from my mistakes, learn from the things that went well, learn from the things that went wrong, and learn and to try and be wiser. And so that's one of my goals. And then, I was reading my Bible this week. I was reading that story of Joshua and the children of Israel when they crossed the Jordan River. Do you remember that story? They crossed on dry ground, and remember Joshua told 12 men, one from each tribe, to go into the river and to grab a stone, and they were going to set up a memorial. They were going to set up a pillar to remind them of that day where God blessed and they crossed over the Jordan River. So they went down, they got those stones, and the reason why is so that they could tell their children, so it would remind their children about what God had done for them. And as I was reading that story, I asked myself, what am I setting up in my life to remind my children and to let my children know of what God has done in my life? And one of the things that I've got so many reasons for recording, My Story Won't Wow You. One is to be a blessing to you. I've heard a couple men tell me, I have a testimony similar to yours. I grew up in a church, and I didn't know how to share my testimony. I didn't think other people would be interested, but now I want to share my testimony with other people. It may be something similar to mine, but you should be sharing your testimony with other people. And so that's one reason. I've got a couple other reasons, but one reason I realized this week of why I want to record My Story Won't Wow You is for my children. One day, let's just pretend for a little bit. Let's pretend I pass away today. I load up in the car, load up everything, and I pass away after recording this episode. I want my daughters one day when they grow up to be able to go back and hear their daddy's voice and to be able to listen about some of the stories and some of the things their dad learned from his life and to learn some lessons that he would share and just to know me in that way. And so maybe that's another way that may be emotionally sentimental. I'm a father. I'm a dad of 3 girls, and so what else can you expect? And yes, I get all the jokes. I get all that about being a girl dad. And so, but I love my 3 daughters now. By the way, 3rd daughter arrived. I think the last time we recorded an episode, we talked about, she was on the way, but this time she's arrived. Little Victory Bell Jimenez, and she was born 8 pounds and 21 inches long and born the 23rd of March in 2021. And just a little bundle of joy, and just mommy and baby are doing well, and so nothing else I could ask for, amen. And so let's go ahead and dive right into our story today. I'm not going to go and follow up with what we've already talked about. You can go back and listen to the other 2 portions. But from last time where we left off is we just loaded up in a motorhome. We were leaving Florida, leaving our home, and we were going to begin traveling as full-time missionaries, traveling the United States to raise support. Now, let me just stop there for a second. We're already stopping. And let me stop there for a second and talk about that. A lot of people, when they hear the term, missionaries traveling, raising support, they don't really know, what is that? What our church is doing, or what's the missionary doing? What is raising support? And so what a missionary will do is, a missionary, in order to survive on another field, typically they can't work a job. All right? They're not from that country. And so typically they can't hold down a job. They have to have special visas and special paperwork, and sometimes they have to have actual citizenship of the country. And they can't go get another job. And for 2, working a full-time ministry, starting a church, learning the language, doing all those things, that's not really a great time to have to work a full-time job anyway. But the point being is a lot of times they can't work a full-time job, so how are they going to provide for their family? How are they going to eat? How are they going to, rent? How are they going to buy a house? How are they going to do all these things? And so what a missionary does is he will take his family, or who, single, however he is, and he will go around and travel church to church to church, and he's raising support. And support is basically a church who says, we will take you on for support. We will support you. meaning we're going to send so much money to you every single month. And so it could be $50, could be $25, could be $100, $150, could be $200, $300, $400, $500. And there's churches who do even more than that. And so that's the same thing that Paul did. You'll find the New Testament churches would send Paul money. They would send him money. He talks about the gifts that they had sent to him. They would send him money. They would send him different things. Now, Paul also was a tent maker. He also made some money himself, and that's a wise thing to do. But in today's world, it's very beneficial for a missionary to go around and, quote-unquote, raise support, to have churches who take them on for support and give them money. And once they reach that... For instance, every missionary has a certain amount of money they need to be able to survive on the field month to month based on that country, what kind of currency they use, all those different things factor in. And, they need $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month to survive down in that country or over in that country or up in that country, depending on where you're at. And so that once they raise that certain amount by however many churches it takes, then they are ready to go to the field financially. And so that's what raising support is. As we talked about, the missionaries do it a lot of different ways. Some will load up in a van or a car or whatever. They'll live out of a suitcase. They'll go from hotel to hotel to hotel. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. I know for Dad, what was very important to him was that we as missionaries be able to keep doing school. We were homeschooled at this time, and frankly, just living out of a suitcase and being in a car all day, that's effective, and you can do not get me wrong, there's plenty of missionaries who do homeschool that way, but that just wasn't the most effective way for us. 3 kids, and so we got a motorhome, and I was corrected by my father. I guess he listened to the last episode, and it was, I think I said we got a Coachman or something. I think he said it was actually a 39-foot Santera, and so I just wanted to correct that and put that out there. And but we had a 39-foot Santera. We loaded up on a dolly, a Buick, an old silver Buick LeSabre, and we loaded up and pulled out of the parking lot at Winkler Road Baptist Church to begin raising support across the United States. And immediately, we began driving all over the United States. We went pretty soon after, we went up to New York, and then from there, we went down to Mississippi, and from there, we went over to all over the place. And so that's what missionaries do. They just drive and drive and drive from one meeting to the next. Sometimes they'll try to get meetings in the same area, and they'll be at one church Sunday morning, another church Sunday night, another church Wednesday night, trying to raise support and show people the vision that they have for the field that they are going to. And so we began traveling around and just trying to raise support, and boy, did we have a great time just traveling the United States. It almost sounds like a vacation, but it is very, very difficult. Imagine this, okay? Imagine going back to being a kid. And, you go into a church on a Sunday morning and you begin to make friends, okay? You go to Sunday school and you'll play with this kid and you'll eat at his house and you'll play with him, after lunch and, you'll do all that. And then Sunday night you're there again and you're fellowshipping and you're talking to that same kid. He's your friend. And then, a couple hours later, goodbye for forever. And that's the way it was every single week. How long did we travel on the road? Was it 2 years? I'm not really sure how long we traveled on the road, but we traveled for a couple of years, and every single week you're making friends and breaking up with them. And so that can be extremely tough on a kid traveling on the road. There's a lack of a sense of stability in a way. They don't have the extended family around them. They've got their close family, their immediate family, their mom, their dad, those different things, but they don't have the extended family. They don't have the friends. They don't have their home church that they're used to, that they've been in. They don't have their home. They're on the road, and so things are very different. And so a missionary kid going through just deputation, not even the field, but just going through deputation, it can be very, very difficult for him. He can be lonely because he feels like he doesn't really have any true close friends. He can feel sometimes just like he's never sure exactly what's going on. They can kind of revert back to this. They're kind of shy because they don't know anybody. They walk into a church, it's not that they're socially awkward, and it's not that they're backward, they just don't know anybody. And every single week, I'll just be frank. Being a missionary kid, hey, I'm not a missionary anymore, so I can say whatever. Being a missionary kid, it can get a little annoying at points having to go into a new church every Sunday, to put a smile on your face, to go up because you have to make a good impression, okay? And to go up to everybody and shake their hands and give them a prayer card and things that, by the way, they need to be doing. All right, but it can be scary. It can be sometimes annoying. It can get on your nerves. Every single week, the same thing. And so pray for your missionary kids while they're going through deputation. Be praying for them because that's a very difficult time. So we began traveling along and purchased that Santero we were traveling around in, and that Santero was a piece of junk. I'll just be frank. And we eventually got a different RV because that one literally fell apart. The coating on top of the roof, they roll on this coating. It began peeling up in little white pieces, and basically as you would drive, the white pieces would fly off behind the RV, and so if you're driving behind us, it looked like it was snowing, and who knows what kind of accidents we caused because of all the pieces flying all over the road and everywhere. And then not only that, but Dad was constantly doing repairs because we had leaks. And if you've ever been in an RV and you have leaks, it's almost impossible to stop without replacing the roof. And trust me, I live in an RV right now, and it's almost impossible. And so constantly sealing leaks. And then the sidewall was detaching from the floor, meaning as you're driving along, just the rumbling of the road and the tires and everything, where Dad was sitting in the driver's seat, if you look down between the wall and the floor, you could see the road because it was literally coming apart. And so he'd get 2x4s and bolt it and screw it together, and the thing was literally falling apart. And but there we were, the 5 of us traveling around in a motorhome, enjoying it. I mean, we got to see great sights, went to, New York City, went to Washington, D.C., we went to St. Louis and saw the Arch. We've been to a lot of different places, and very enjoyable to be able to see those sights and everything. That was exciting. And, Dad and Mom taught us a lesson during that time in our lives, that though things were different, though we didn't have, the close friends that we were able to see every single week, though we were away from grandma and grandpa, though we were away from our home church, though we were away from having, a literal house, although the RV became our home, but though we were away from having a literal house, they taught us from a very young age the ministry is fun. The ministry is fun. Serving Jesus is fun. And I think a big problem, a big reason why we're losing our young people in churches is because we've taught them this kind of rigid evangelicalism that, and I don't even like that term, and but this type of rigidity to religion that, we do this, we do that, and we don't expose them to the fact that serving Jesus is fun. It's the best life we can live. We get to see things. We get to do things. We get to have things that nobody else gets to do, but we get to because we're serving Jesus Christ. And that's something they ingrained into us. We went to see, the Statue of Liberty and went to all around New York City, and that's a story in and of itself because we got lost. And but we traveled, saw New York City, and Dad reminded us, you get to see this because you are serving Jesus, and serving Jesus is fun. There's a lot of people who would like to stand beneath the Statue of Liberty, but they can't. You get to because you're serving Jesus, and serving Jesus is fun. And that was just ingrained in me. And now I know, even in my own life, and something I want to teach my children, serving Jesus is the best thing you can do. It's fun. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying serving Jesus is fun. Now, is that why we should serve Jesus? No. We shouldn't be fun seekers. That's not our goal. We serve him because we love him, because he deserves it, because he commanded it. Being fun, though, is just a byproduct. And I love that fact. I love that serving Jesus is fun. And so getting accustomed to living in an RV, it's difficult. I mean, we had 3 kids. Not we, I was one of the 3 kids. There were 3 kids, and homeschooling full-time on the road, traveling, driving hours and hours every single day. Almost every single day, it seemed like, and constantly being somewhere new, but just transitioning to an RV, propane stove, propane oven, small stove, small refrigerator, and transitioning to those things are a little difficult. But one thing that was interesting transitioning to was, in a house, you just go to the bathroom, flush, and never think about it. When you live in an RV, it's a little bit different. And I've told this story before way back in probably, I think, episode number 3 in Hold Your Nose and Help Your Leader. But I will tell it again because I can't think about, transitioning to a motorhome life without talking about this story. We were in Mississippi and fresh to the missionary trail, fresh to, RV living. And we pulled up to a church, and they had us park on the side of the church. Now, the road was kind of running. Just imagine in your head, the road was going along, and if you looked to your right, let's say you're driving the car and you looked out the passenger side window up a little hill, and there was a church up there, and they had the RV parked where you could see the RV. The church was behind the RV. You could see the RV parked on the side of the church, and there was this kind of little hill, and then there was, you keep passing the church, and there's the little driveway. You turn to your right and go up the hill, and there's a parking lot, and that's how you get to the church. And so the preacher had us parked there, and he said, you can empty your gray water down the hill and it'll just go into the ditch. Now, if you've never been in a motorhome before, there's 2 tanks under your motorhome. One is the gray water. All right, gray water it's dirty. Don't get me wrong, it's nasty, but there's nothing like necessarily harmful. To a degree, there's nothing harmful in it. So it's like the stuff that comes out of your sink. It's dirty dishwater. It's the stuff that comes out of your shower. It's dirty, and you take a shower, and that's what comes out of the gray water and goes into the gray water tank. And so that stuff you can release on the grass. It's fine, it's going to go down to the ditch anyway. And so typically you can just release that anywhere as long as you have permission. You don't just want to release it, wherever you want and not ask for permission first. But the preacher gave us permission. And then the second tank you have under your camper is a black water tank. And in case you can't figure that out, the only other drain in your RV is the toilet. And, that stuff is nasty. That stuff stinks, and that's why you have to put an odorizer in your black tank and to try and keep the smell down. And that's just, that's some pretty foul, thick stuff. And so that you need to, empty at the proper place, into the sewer. And they didn't have a sewer outlet hookup at this church, and so we were just going to, hold, it's called a holding tank, and you can just hold it in the tank for a few days until you go to a campground or something, and typically they have somewhere where you can dump it. And so we were there, and Saturday night everything was good. Sunday morning came along, and Dad was in the bathroom shaving, and all of a sudden the water began backing up in the sink and backing up into the bathtub, into the shower. Well, what's that mean? It means your gray water tank is full. Has nowhere else to go, so it starts coming back up into the drains. And so Dad looked at me, and he said, "Josh, I want you to go outside, and I want you to open up the little compartment, and there's going to be 2 handles. I want you to pull the big one on the right." And so I went outside, and he tells the story, he thinks he said it the right way, but that's what I heard, pull the big one on the right. At least that's what I think, it's been so many years now. And so I went outside, and I opened the compartment. Well, the big one was on the left. And so I thought, well, surely he got, the big one right. And so I, had the hose was laying out there. The bathroom window was just above the compartment. And so I reached out and I pulled the big one on the left. And skadoosh. I mean, the stuff from the black tank just started coming out and just going all over the front lawn of the church. I mean, toilet stuff. And, oh my goodness, the stink, the smell, I mean, the look of it alone. And all I heard was from the window, I heard, "Oh no." And so Dad came, the camper shakes whenever you go and, running a camper. And so the camper was shaking, and he comes down the steps and he slams it shut, and he said, "No, that's the wrong one." And so there we are, church clothes and everything. We've got a hose and we're spraying down, dung, if we want to use a biblical term. We're spraying it down the hill, and that was a great introduction to motorhome living. When I talk about motorhome living, I can't help thinking of the story where we were driving down the road, and we, of course, were pulling a car, behind the RV, and we were going to a gas station. We needed gas, and so we were braking to pull into the gas station. And there's always this kind of little TV, a little screen that you can see what's behind you in the RV. And all of a sudden, Dad was driving, and he saw this car pass us. And he said, "Man, that looks a lot like our car." And he looked back, and our car was gone. And it was our car. The tongue on the dolly had broken, and our car decided to head for the gas station by itself, nobody driving it, obviously, and it's just heading straight for the gas pumps. And so my dad, this is the highest I've ever seen him jump. He was like Superman. I didn't fully grasp the situation of what was going on. I was only 10, I was only 11. And all I remember is my dad said, "No," and he swung open the door. I mean, we had just pulled into the parking lot barely. He swung open the driver's side door and leaped out of the RV. And all I saw was look out the window, and Dad's running as fast as he can across the parking lot of the gas station. And he's trying to get to our car because it is about to barrel into the gas pumps. And so he's running, the car's going, it's on a mission, it wants to blow something up. And so Dad's running along, gets to the car, and I believe it was locked, and he couldn't get the car to stop. And so he's running back, he gets the keys. Well, the car it misses the gas pumps, but in this gas station, there's a Burger King, and there's this big picture window, and people are sitting there in Burger King, and now they've got a car barreling towards them with no driver. And I remember Dad tells the story that he looked, and there was this couple sitting in the window, and their jaws dropped because they're about to die, because there is a car just about to crash right through the windows. Well, the car goes, it hits the curb, it bounces off the curb, now it's coming back towards the gas pumps, and it hits another car, and then kind of goes back and hits the curb again, and kind of comes to a slow stop. And by that point, Dad's able to get a hand on it, stop it. And can you imagine? I'm only thinking now, if I was the father in that situation and had to handle that, somebody probably should have died that day, but by God's grace, everybody was safe and alive, and no gas stations blew up. We would have been on the news. That would have been pretty cool, and they would have interviewed me. "Are you the kid, whose car blew up the gas station?" Yes. And but anyway, everything worked out. When it hit the other car, our car, on the dolly, hit another car, it only hit the tire. And it didn't do any damage to their car whatsoever. So we're talking, a car broke off from an RV in a gas station parking lot, past the pumps, almost hit, a Burger King, and did no damage. That's just incredible. By the way, that's just God. I think there's a song that says, that's just God doing what he does. And that's just God, my friend. Nobody could orchestrate it that way. Nobody could do that. Only God could work that out. And there's stories in your life that you could tell me that are funny to you, that are amazing to you, that are comical, whatever, and you look back at it and you're like, you know what? That was just God. Only God could have done that. And you know what? That's what I'm talking about. I want my children to remember how good God has been to me. That was God's protection. Somebody, and I said it jokingly earlier, but somebody could have really been hurt that day. That could have been literally a catastrophe on my life's timeline. And Dad could have got run over by the car. I mean, that was a something that could have turned out very, very bad. I mean, we could have even been paying, insurance on somebody else's car. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong. But that was just God doing what he does. God just works things out behind the scenes and does exactly what needs to happen because he's God. And God's just so amazing in that way. Glory to God, amen. I love that song, "Blessed be the name of the Lord, glory to his name." I just love how God just works things out and provides and does things just how he needs to. And so those are two stories. When you say RV living, when you talk about driving on the road, those are two stories that really come to my mind very quickly. The one about the sewer and the one about the almost killing people at the gas station. And so after that, I remember Dad always kept the door to the car unlocked when it was on the dolly. And that way you could get in quickly and stop the car, if you had to. And but we loved traveling in the RV, going to campgrounds and doing different things. And Mom and Dad really did a great job at making sure that we were able to see the sights of America as we traveled around, and that we were able to just, learn to make the RV our home. And it literally became our home. And some people think it's weird when I talk about my camper that I live in currently. And when I talk about it, I say, the living room or the dining room, it's really just all one room. But people think it's kind of weird, but the point is I've made it home. It's where I live. It's my house. It's home to me. And, there's a lesson to be learned in that. Sometimes we want to equate, our status as to where we live. Listen, my friend, we cannot place our status, we cannot place who we are in what we live in. We can't do that. Our status and who we are is all based on what Jesus has done for us and who we are as a Christian. Doesn't matter if you live in a camper. Doesn't matter if you live in a single house. Doesn't matter if you live in a mobile home. Doesn't matter if you live in a single wide or a 2-story mansion. It really doesn't matter. That's not who you are. Who you are is who you are on the inside. That's based on what you've done with Jesus Christ. And that's such an important lesson to learn. And so we enjoyed traveling on the road, and there's some other stories I could tell, I'm sure. They're probably slipping my mind right now of the miracles that God has done for us, the times where we've broken down and God has provided, the times where we've there was a story, and I should get Dad on here to tell that story, but we broke down, and I think our transmission went out, and we were in that's a sizable repair on an RV. I remember we were at a church, and they said, the love offering is, it's going to be really good this year, and they gave the exact amount, to the penny. They gave the exact amount for our transmission repair, and God just, as I said, that's God just doing what he does. And so we finished traveling up in an RV, raised a majority of our support, and decided, it's time to leave to head to Canada and begin language school. And that's a story for a different time, though. If you want me to continue the story, why don't you send me an email at joshua@sandycreekstirrings.com, or you can message us on Facebook as well, and we'll continue this series, My Story Won't Wow You. My friend, make sure you are telling other people about your testimony. And then make sure you're doing things in your life, setting up memorials to God that will remind your children of how good God has been in your life. And as you do, my friend, keep looking up and keep stirred up for the cause of Christ.